Down that began early Saturday morning after congressional Democrats and President Donald Trump's team failed to reach a deal on legislation to fund the Department of Homeland Security through September. Congress is on recess until February 23rd, and both sides appear dug into their positions. The impasse affects agencies such as the Transportation Security Administration, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Coast Guard, the Secret Service, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The work at ICE and CBP goes on unabated because Trump's tax and spending cut law from 2025 provided billions more to those agencies that could be tapped for operations. At least 3 people are dead and others are in the hospital after a shooter opened fire at a high school hockey game today in Rhode Island. State police and ATF agents were on the scene. Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebian told reporters outside the Dennis Lynch Arena he thought the worst when he heard the news.
This was an isolated incident in some ways. It's tragic. And you think about that, right? You have the family, all the resources. We have men and women out there, so your mind goes in all different directions.
Police Chief Tina Gonzalez says the incident could be part of a domestic dispute. An ATF source told Fox the shooter's wife and 2 of his children are among those dead. Some San Francisco residents are joining forces to shut down its reparations fund. According to the Pacific Legal Foundation and Fox News, several San Francisco residents and Californians have filed a lawsuit challenging the city's ordinance that establishes a fund for black residents only. The lawsuit alleges that the ordinance is discriminating based on race because it allows taxpayer money to be funneled into the fund. Gerard Felitti of the Lawfare Project made these comments on AFR.
I'm almost at a loss for words because what San Francisco did is invite legal action. This is unconstitutional, plain and simple. It violates equal protection that's clear based on clear and recent Supreme Court guidance and rulings. So what San Francisco did here is essentially creating a race-based government benefit, which is something that the Supreme Court has clearly said you are not allowed to do.
He said what San Francisco wants to do is redistribute money from those that never owned slaves in a state that never had slavery and give it to people who were never slaves.
I think the end is to desensitize the American people to the notion that there should be money that's given by the government to people on the basis of whatever the government thinks it should do. In other words, San Francisco knows that it's going to lose this case. It knows that this is unconstitutional.
He went on to say it's also a move to try and punish white people for their perceived success. An economist says the Trump administration is doing good work, but there are things she would still like to see done to improve things such as education, income, and job opportunities. More from AFN's Chris Woodward.
Rachel Gressler at Advancing American Freedom recommends the Trump administration remove more of the regulatory barriers that she says are making it difficult for businesses to expand and to increase incomes.
I know that the administration cares a lot about manufacturing and making more things in America, and yet our regulatory apparatus creates a burden that's equal to about $29,000 per worker in regulatory costs for every manufacturer in the U.S. And so if you could remove some of those unnecessary regulations, that's money that can be freed up for those manufacturers to expand, for them to reduce their prices, for them to pay their workers more.
The Trump administration has done things to help people and businesses in the One Big Beautiful Bill, but Gressler thinks there may be room for more policies down the road.
Just getting rid of things that are doing nothing but draining the economy, and there are plenty of other ways that they could do that as well, such as expanding apprenticeship programs, and other tax and regulatory barriers out there.
I'm Chris Woodward.
The cost for a cup of coffee keeps going up. Coffee prices in the U.S. were up 18% in January from a year ago, according to the latest Consumer Price Index. Over 5 years, the government reported coffee prices rose 47%. And that is all our time for this hour's news. We invite you to go to afn.net. You can see a whole lot more there. I'm Robert Thorne.
American Family Radio would like to say thank you to Preborn. We value our partnership with Preborn as we share some of the same goals, namely the saving of unborn babies and also saving their mothers' souls through Jesus. We'd also like to thank you for your support of Preborn. You can donate anytime at preborn.com. A gift of just $28 provides a free ultrasound for an expectant mother. This NRB broadcast is underwritten in part by Preborn.
Darkness darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner. My name is Abraham Hamilton III. I'm your host of this program. Look at Jeff Reed in the building. I see him. What's happening, Jeffrey Fresh? We are broadcasting live and direct to you from Nashville, Tennessee at the Opryland Hotel, where the National Religious Broadcasters 2026 convention is starting tomorrow. So I have the distinct honor and privilege of being the first AFR program to broadcast this year, an honor that I will gladly hold as we bring this program to you. We are so grateful to be able to do so. At this very moment, many of you, if not most of you, are making your transition from your part-time jobs where you generate an income to your full-time jobs where you cultivate an outcome. And as you do so, I want to remind you to do so with intentionality, understanding the primacy that God places on family. I say this on a daily basis. I will continue to state this on a daily basis. What goes on in your house is far more important than what goes on in the White House. The purpose of this expression is never to minimize what transpires in the White House. Never. The purpose is solely to articulate for you and for myself, frankly, what is true. You and I are directly accountable and responsible for what we can directly influence. Certainly, we are responsible for what we influence indirectly, but we should not look to indirect influence as something that should usurp or transcend what we have the capacity to directly influence. And I was talking to some of our AFR team here. You know, there are lots of components to what's happening in our country that are necessary components. We need to have a robust Christian witness on Capitol Hill. We need elected officials that carry a biblical worldview into the legislative halls, into the judiciaries, into all of these other areas. But if we have all of those bases covered, but we do not have the bride of Christ in our country executing our King's commission to make disciples, guys, we are missing the most central and enduring and impacting aspect of our society. To say it simply, if we have a constitutional Republican form of government where the citizenry has the wherewithal to elect and select our servant leaders, but our population is increasingly wicked, what kind of servant leaders do you think our elected officials will enact? What kind of servant leaders do you think the populace will elect? What kind of policies will flow from that? And so the unfortunate reality is that, in my estimation, we do not have enough people focusing on executing the Great Commission. And not surprisingly, it is the one thing that impacts everything else. If we have a population armed with a biblical worldview, well, then let me be specific and clear about this. I'm not talking about some type of pietistic moralism. I'm talking about people who are born again, regenerate members of our Lord's remnant. We must not neglect the King's Commission because everything else about our society is impacted by it as a result of that. It's simply the truth. And here's the other most important feature of this. It is the only institutional execution that has benefit, yes, temporally, but also eternally. As we proclaim our Lord's gospel and make disciples, we expand our Lord's kingdom to where fellow image bearers are transitioned to be members of God's eternal family. And as we are able to do life and contend for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords on this side of eternity, we have the additional benefit of these very people joining us in eternal glory. We must be about our Father's business. Now, we are joined today, as is our custom, here on site with us. We have our producer extraordinaire to my right, but never to my right sociopolitically. Now, let's get that clear. Producer extraordinaire, the real J Mac, ladies and gentlemen. And we have the home team. My man, 100 grand behind the boards, Mr. Bobby Rosa. And Marty Sparks is lighting up the dark from there as well, helping us to bring this program to you. Before we get to the issues of the day, because there are a lot of things to get to, some things certainly are foolishness. We got the foolishness du jour. But there's some things that are greatly encouraging that we will get to momentarily, but we must begin in the Word of God. We must start in God's holy word. Joshua chapter 24. I mean, I was talking, before we came on air to my man Travis, and we were having this conversation. This does not require this assessment that we're discussing here about the necessity of executing our King's Commission. It doesn't require specialized expertise. It doesn't require you being an erudite historian, that you wear tweed sweaters, sweet tweed jackets, and you wear sweater vests, and you have a pipe that you dangle from the bottom of your lips. Doesn't require any of that. We have Bibles. We just need to open them and read. Joshua chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. Look at how the Lord blesses us by recording the end of Joshua's book. I would remind you that Joshua's book concludes as the transition point to the era of the judges. Okay? Joshua chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. This is what God's word says. It came about after these things that Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, on the north of Mount Gaash. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, and had known all the deeds of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Now I want to ask you a question. What do you think the Lord is conveying to us when the Spirit of God moves the recording of this expression? Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua. What is being said there to us? What is being said to us there? I know we often have the scriptures on the screen so you can see it for yourself. What do you think is being said there? Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua. And take into consideration that this precedes the book of Judges, right? What is in the book of Judges? The book of Judges pretty much shows the cyclical apostasy in the nation of Israel that followed entree into the promised land, with a few exceptions throughout the entirety of the book. Then you have the transition toward the people of God rejecting Yahweh as their supreme potentate because of the two considerations. One, Samuel's sons didn't follow the ways of Yahweh as Samuel did, which led to people of Israel to say, well, we need to be like the nations surrounding us. What is stated in this expression? Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua. The Lord is telling us very plainly that fidelity to Yahweh died. Consistent fidelity to Yahweh died when the elders who survived Joshua passed away. There was fidelity in Joshua's day. There was fidelity, generally speaking. Let me say it this way. Fidelity, generally speaking, in Joshua's day. Fidelity, generally speaking, during the days of the elders who survived Joshua. But what transpires after that generation passed on? What does it look like? What do you think happened? A couple things to consider. How do you think the Israelites regarded the history of Yahweh's interaction with them? Yahweh's story and interacting with the people of Israel. How do you think the memorials that were constructed under Joshua's leadership were regarded? Think they were given attention to? How do you think the cultivation of the hearts and minds of the children in Israel took place in the generations following the passage of the elders? An Old Testament Israelite version of a 1619 project? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that the Israelites began to find other things important, more important than the cultivation of the minds and hearts of their children in Yahweh worship? Can you envision? You kind of see what I'm getting at. It kind of looks like what's happened in our own country. It kind of looks like, how do you get from Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall in 1980 to you have now Marxists openly running for office and being elected in our country. How do you get from never forget 9/11 when the Twin Towers came down to when now you're hearing the Muslim declaration 5 times a day in Manhattan today, in Manhattan? Guys, what I'm getting at is, history, yes, often repeats itself, but it often rhymes. You don't have to venture too far. How do you get from walking on the Red Sea on dry ground when the entirety of the nations, what the song of Miriam was saying on the other side of the Red Sea, where the horse and his rider were cast down, where the global superpower of the world at the time met its demise in an effort to subjugate God's people? And then you get to Judges chapter 6, where you have a young man by the name of Gideon saying, man, where's all this stuff that our forefathers were talking about? I heard they talked all that yang, but I don't know nothing about that. I'm behind this wine press threshing wheat. My man Will said this a long time ago. When we, the people of God, make more about everything else, we, by necessity, downgrade the significance of Jesus in our lives. The cyclical testimony of the book of Judges is that you had a people not crying out to the Lord, not because of faithful devotion to Yahweh, but because of pain. The Midianites, they're terrorizing us. They're beating us up. They're stealing our flocks. They're abusing us. Lord, help. And what happens? The Lord helps. And what happens? As soon as there's any alleviation of the pain, there's a return to the pig's trough. What I'm driving at, guys, is we are in one of those cycles in our own nation. We have, oh, Lord, help me. We have what we call the church. We have all kinds of priorities. But the things God has told us to do, they're not a priority. I visited the church one time. I was speaking at the place. I had a conversation with the pastor who invited me. And the pastor started telling me about the church's health. And he conveyed that to me by reflecting on the building programs. And initially I was confused, and it kept going on and on and on. And was telling me about this building and that building. And I asked a question concerning the quality of obedience of the congregation. To which the pastor said, man, I don't know. And it grieved my heart, because it was one of the instances, and we continued in. So this is not this pastor. No, we had a great conversation. We built, and we still have a relationship to this day from that conversation. But he said, Brother Abe, I didn't realize I've been focusing on the wrong thing. Guys, you got a lot of people in the professing body of Christ in our own nation focusing on the wrong thing. And we don't recognize that the barbarians are not at the gate, they're in the house. But often we become so nose blind, we don't even recognize it. The Lord's commission is not an option. It's a command.
a Discipleship Minute with Joseph Parker.
God spoke the world into existence. God used his words to create the universe. God's words are powerful, but a very important truth that God wants to convey to us in his word is that our words are powerful as well. Not saying they're as powerful as God's, obviously, but they are certainly much more powerful than I think we tend to think. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A soft word turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Are my words fruitful? Are they words that honor God, that build God's kingdom? Or are the words I speak words that tear down, that cause difficulty, that make life tough? Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body.
I'm Rick Scarborough, and this is my take. A Venezuelan official is claiming that 100 people were killed in the U.S. operation to capture President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. According to Reuters, Venezuela's Interior Minister Cabello claims that Venezuela's army posted a list of 23 names of dead soldiers killed in the attack. Cabello added that Maduro suffered a leg injury during the capture, while his wife sustained a head injury. An administration official told Fox Digital News on Tuesday that 7 U.S. service members were injured in the operation. The fact that the extremely complex and grueling mission was successfully executed with so few injuries is a testament to the expertise of our warriors. The mission was led by Army's elite Special Operations Delta Force. President Trump is keeping his word to keep America safe. All Americans should be thankful for his courage and his actions. I'm Rick Scarborough, and that's my take.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Abraham Hamilton III. This weekend, we will be in Simsboro, Louisiana, starting Friday evening, Friday, February 20th. We will be in Simsboro, Louisiana at Simsboro First Baptist Church. Looking forward to kicking off the family-focused weekend. You can go to fbcsimsboro.org, the event page. Click on the event page. You'll see Family Focus Weekend there. You can register there. The church is asking you to do so they can anticipate how many people will be coming. There is no charge whatsoever for the event. We just want to minister to as many people as the Lord will allow us to in order to really recalibrate our heart and minds to be effective in doing what we just talked about in the last segment, making disciples. And some people might think when you say Family Focus Weekend, when we're talking primarily about children, of course we're going to talk about interactions with children, but it's not only going to be addressing interactions with children. So you do not want to miss this. If you're in the area or willing to come to the area, you are invited to participate. We are looking forward to this event this weekend. It'll be Friday, Saturday, and it will culminate with the Sunday morning worship service. By God's grace, I will be delivering the sermon the Sunday morning as well. You can see the itinerary for this weekend if you go to fbcsimsboro.org. Click on the events page, Family Focus Weekend. The itinerary is posted there, and we are so excited to be a part of that. Looking forward to it this weekend. You do not want to miss it. All right. I want to start the show off today with discussing, this is not foolishness at all. while many people were doing their St. Valentine's Day stuff. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Germany at the Munich Security Conference, and I am telling you, he delivered probably one of the best speeches I've ever heard, personally, that I've ever heard, meaning that I've heard it with my own two ears. I watched the video. I watched it and I heard it with my own two ears, in addition to just reading about it. It's the best speech I've ever heard, honestly, on foreign policy. But it wasn't just foreign policy. It was really a communication of an American view, certainly President Trump's America First agenda, but really fleshing out what that means for America's allies. And Secretary Rubio said plainly, listen, the things that we're seeking to accomplish through the Trump administration, we are well able to do this on our own. Saying, in other words, we don't need y'all's help to do this, but we want your help. We don't need y'all to participate in doing this, but we want you to be a part of this. He demonstrated the historical connexity between the United States of America and our European allies. He got numerous standing ovations. And this is one of those things where you certainly can listen to clips and see highlights from the speech that will give you a sense of what happened. But truly, in order to digest all that was said, you really need to watch the whole speech. I've shared the speech in its entirety on my X account, on my X page. It's only about 18 minutes and change long, but it's worth your perusal. And to hear the United States of America represented with such clarity and potency and generosity and charitability all in one presentation. I'm telling you, it was moving. I was moved. And I truly believe one of the central figures that have elevated their station as a result of this President Trump's current administration is Marco Rubio. Now, I have to tell you, I was not a fan of Marco Rubio, not a detractor of his, but from his days in the Gang of Eight, he was one that I was quite put off by. And I'm still on trust but verify. But I also have to be an honest assessor of what I'm seeing. There is something different about Marco Rubio now, and it's pretty remarkable what is being displayed for the world to see. And like I said, the clarity, the conviction, the potency, but also the generosity. It was remarkable because you could see some of those stuffy Europeans that they didn't really want to hear nothing that Marco Rubio had to say. And as he spoke, they were visibly changed in their demeanor as to what he said. And the repeated standing ovations were indicative of that. And so I encourage you to go and watch the whole speech. It is worth your time. It is one I encourage you to watch with your children, frankly, and to get a picture of what American leadership is supposed to look like. Because what we had the previous years is not it. Is not it. And with that, following Marco Rubio's speech before the Munich Security Council, he spent some time in Hungary with Viktor Orban. And, my wife and I have been doing just a little bit of studying because I was interested in getting a bit more details into how do we get from World War II till we get to a USSR advancing to where there's a Berlin Wall, and oh man, to see what happened, how Europe went from the throes of the National Socialists in Germany to the United Soviet Socialist Republic of Russia. Not a republic at all. The history there, man, it's just Europe literally went largely from Hitler to Stalin. And our country, and I think it's quite intentional, that not many people understand the details of what Soviet Leninism was and Stalinism was, and exactly how the USSR expanded to become what it is, what it became. It's a worthwhile investment to study that aspect of history. But getting back to this, Marco Rubio said something, and this is obvious. He said something in his joint press conference with Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. That, man, it's not rocket surgery. This is what should be understood. But for decades in our country, we have embraced really a perverted notion of immigration to where we've allowed the practical ethic to be, well, surely foreigners have a right to come to the United States of America. And guys, simply put, that's not so. Nobody who was born in another country has a right to come to the United States of America. They may want to come to the United States of America. It may be better for them to come to the United States of America. And yes, there have been numerous times where people's lives hung in the balance, and coming to the United States of America has literally saved their lives. But that fact doesn't mean that anyone has a right to come here. And Secretary Rubio said as much during his press conference with Viktor Orban. I don't want to hear you. I want you to hear him state it just as plainly as he said it during their joint press conference today. Listen to and watch clip number one. Clip one, Secretary Rubio. Go.
I've said this repeatedly. I don't know why it's so hard for some to comprehend it, so let me repeat it again. A visa, no one's entitled to a visa. There is no constitutional right to a visa. Okay, a visa is a permission to enter our country as a visitor. If you enter our country as a visitor, and as a visitor in our country, be it a student, a tourist, a journalist, whatever you want to be, and you undertake activities that are against the national interest, the national security of the United States, we will take away your visa. In fact, if we knew you were going to do it, we probably wouldn't have given you your visa.
Yeah. Like, why it should not be a jolting notion to hear a U.S. government official say, hey, you don't have a right to a visa. And guess what? If you get one and then you do something that's hostile to our nation, we'll take it from you. Guys, why is that? Why is that such a big deal? Why is that such a big deal? It shouldn't be. But you know why it's such a big deal? Because, frankly, because of the effectiveness of the Gramscian march through the institutions in our own nation. You know, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but let's face a couple facts, right? It's not surprising that the people who hate God, whether they hate God due to their atheistic orientations or they hate God because of their penchant for false religion, where, let's just keep it a buck, where they're worshiping demons, it shouldn't be surprising that they all coalesce around this notion of where they all want to see the United States of America destroyed. You know, I've shared on this show, it's not surprising to me that the Islamists who seek to penetrate the United States of America, to subvert our nation, officially and formally, usually do so through the Democrat Party because they find it easier to do so through the Democrat Party. That's why when people ask, well, how y'all do know Muslims reject homosexuality and all the sexual deviance, so how can a Muslim be a Democrat? Because it's an Islamist will, and we talked about this when Robert Spencer was testifying on Capitol Hill from the Muslim Brotherhood Manifesto, that Islamists want to use our own system against us. So where would an Islamist find more effective access? In a binary partisan framework. All right? Similarly, or let me say it this way, analogously. Now, similarly is effective. Similarly works here. We must never forget that Marxism is the socio-political ideology advocated for and advanced by people who by and large are atheists. Moses Mordecai Marx Levy, Karl Engels, the Leninists, the expansion of Marxism historically from its genesis, all came as the implementation mechanism of a view of the world, also known as a worldview, that rejects the knowledge of God. We have to understand that. So when you have these people, and we can talk about, the Frankfurt School penetrating the United States of America following, or should I say in the shadow, in the wake of World War II, that they sought to infiltrate the various systems of operation in the United States of America and pervert them to their own ideology. This is why I consistently reiterate for you guys that you should never forget that critical race theory is nothing more than a subset of critical theory. It is the application of critical theory with its same ideals, objectives, and pursuits as the critical theorists that was articulated and fomented in an exclusively European context. They just found another seam to pull at in the United States of America. In Europe, the seam that they sought to pull was always the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And doing a little bit of digging into the history of Europe following World War II, it was interesting to see how Stalin popularized the notion concerning the effort to nationalize European farmland. And those farmers who didn't go along with with Stalin's plan, he called them wealthy peasants. Think about that. The wealthy peasants. Now, I might have been on that night, but it wasn't last night. How can you be wealthy and a peasant at the same time? Because the truth was, and Stalin knew, many of the European farmers, they were poor. But they had to use the Marxist binary framework of oppressor and oppressed. So to distinguish the farmers who refused to go along with the Stalinist program, they called them wealthy. And they were seeking to steal from the people, you see, because they refused to cooperate with the Stalinist program. Guys, it's the same thing. Critical theory is the overarching ideology that also gave rise to queer theory, transgender theory, climate alarmism. It's all under the same umbrella. They're finding different seams to advance the same Marxist ideology. That's why the demonic organization Burn, Loot, Murder, also known as BLM, I told you about this, you start digging into their objectives, and you can't tell me because I'm from the hood, so I know what people in the hood care about. You can't tell me people in the hood is like, yeah, and when we gather, we do so to loosen the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. Ain't nobody on any block in any hood in the whole of the United States of America would ever show up for a rally for that. I'm just telling you. No. They're not showing up to transform the Western prescription for the nuclear family. Nah, bruh, Pookie and Ray Ray ain't on that. Never were. That's why the more the truths of the organization's objectives were exposed, you found what happened. A bunch of people saying, nah, I ain't with that. I'm not with that. And so the same thing has happened in our country. We've had nefarious people to infiltrate our own system and advisors all the way up into the White House to echo the same type of insanity like Billie Eilish. No one's illegal on stolen land. And did y'all see how the Tongva tribe in California is like, hey, by the way, Billie Eilish, your house is on stolen land. Since you believe that, why don't you give us your house? Because that's our land. Isn't it interesting that these people don't talk about stolen land in any other context? They don't talk about how Europe's borders were changed following World War II. They don't talk about how, you want to talk about colonization. Why didn't anybody discuss the fact that the Islamization of various portions of Africa was a product of colonization? Was the Ottoman Empire an exercise in imperialism? You never hear those words put together. Because it's a specific ideological march through the institutions in Western civilization, because the people that seek global dominance, they understand the most strident and opposing force is the Christian worldview.
fostering and adoption is not a Band-Aid for infertility.
Nope,
it is a calling, and God can change the desire of your heart and make that so rewarding. It's the most beautiful, selfless thing. It's pure religion, but it's not a fix to I desire biological child. God has to deal with that in your heart separately.
Hannah's Heart, encouraging couples through infertility and miscarriage. Saturdays, 4 a.m. Central on AFR or on the AFR app.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Freedom from lust. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. Lust is sinful desire contrary to God's will. While it is associated with the craving for sexual pleasure outside marriage, lust can also be a sinful desire for power, money, material things, and more. The Bible says, "Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world." As we cultivate a deeper love of God, satisfying our lusts will become far less enticing. Hear our most recent program on freedom from lust at thechristianworldview.org, and then tune in this weekend for another topic that will sharpen your worldview.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
Without even seeing them show up, I could feel like the darkness.
Jamie Sanchez is another Christian business proprietor who has been targeted for his faith. His Drip Cafe was opened to serve and help the homeless of downtown Denver.
We believe sex outside of marriage and homosexuality is a sin in God's eyes. And the enemy and his minions decided to use that as a platform.
Jesus told us persecution would come.
I would see them, just the rage and the hate. I pictured them doing that at the foot of the cross to Jesus. And I just remembered what he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And so I had to position my heart that way.
The Jamie Sanchez story is one of the videos of the Impact series at stream.afa.net.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride.
See Jamie's story and much more at stream.afa.net. AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Abraham Hamilton III here. Man, we're in the third segment already. Man, I was just getting warmed up. The point that I was making, guys, is terms like, imperialism and the colonialists and all of these things, they're meant to destabilize the citizens of the United States of America, in addition to those who are members of Western civilization, because it's a part of the efforts to undermine. What I was saying before the break is that, as Gramsci postulated, is documented for all posterity in the prison notebooks, is that he said that any nation that is anchored in a biblical ethos, that there's no way you can overcome it. You won't be able to overcome it militarily, because people who are people of freedom, they have this natural penchant. And let me say it differently. You won't be able to overcome it by force, because remember, socialistic and communistic thought is not the brainchild solely of Moses Mordecai Marx Levy. Never forget that Marx was a disciple of Hegel, all right, from whom we got the Hegelian dialectical process. Marx's contribution was the utilization of violence to accomplish socialistic and communistic ends. And remember that socialism was always an intermediary stop on the road toward communism. All right? Gramsci comes along thereafter because they tried to spread Marxism around the world by force. And when they came up against Western civilization, they realized, ruh-roh, we got a problem. Because we selling all of this, but it doesn't work. And I've talked to you guys before about how critical theory developed because after World War I, Marxists believed that the proletariats of the world would be able to unite and overthrow the bourgeoisie. But something happened after World War I that poor Europeans were given access for the first time in large numbers to the West. And guess what they found when they experienced the West? They realized I can be poor here in Europe, but in one generation, my family's lot can change if I get access to freedom. But what I want you guys to know that this wasn't the first time this happened. The reason why the Stalinists end up erecting the Berlin Wall because the same thing happened then. The same thing happened then. And I know this is subsequent to World War I, but it kept happening is what I'm saying. You had East Berliners who experienced West Berlin. They were like, hold up. How about this? When you had the Soviets following World War II, and in the places that the Soviets during World War II, they liberated from Hitler, they had a hard time getting the Soviet soldiers to go back to the USSR because they were like, man, some of these people in these countries, they're living good. These people are living better than we were in the USSR. So these things kept happening. So the idea of revolution by evolution, the long march through the institutions, because Gramsci and others realized, we're not going to be able to do this by force. So we now have to infiltrate and pervert the ideologies of the nations that we want to overthrow. We have to get, and this is a very simplistic, reductionistic, and crude articulation of it, but it's still accurate. What Gramsci and others postulated, we have to infiltrate and get the people of these nations to curse their liberty in favor of our chains. Guys, I'm telling you. That's literally what they talked about. This is why, as we stand today, I experience with my own two eyes and my own two ears. At the exact same time, you have people complaining about how horrible America is. You have people coming to America and they kiss the ground when they get here. How does that happen? How can America be irrepressibly racist and yet the same people want as many people from around the world to come to this country? You either have to be ignorant, evil, or you lying to say America's a horrible place for ethnic minorities. And at the exact same time, you want the world's minorities, you want the world's population to come to America where there would be minorities. You know why they do that? Because they're lying. They know America is not what they're representing her to be. America is not perfect. No nation is perfect, but America is better than every other nation. And I don't say that like a prideful phenomenon. There are things that we can do that other people can't do. I respect the nation of Israel, but you don't have Operation Midnight Hammer without the United States of America. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu would tell you that. This is why, and I don't say this because I'm not like the most experienced world traveler, but I have been to a few other countries. But it's amazing. You very rarely find people who have been to other countries who will categorically say America is just horrible. You know why? Because they've been to other countries. So a lot of the stuff that they're selling us, man, they're lying to us. They're lying to us. And just as we discussed, remember the shows we've done with Bill Federer, what we've done with Israel Wayne, talking about what's happening in Dearborn and Hamtramck in Michigan, what's happening in our own nation. And now we have Zohran Mamdani elected as mayor of New York City. Dating back to 2023 under Eric Adams, the municipal regulations were adjusted to allow limited blasting over speakers of the Islamic call to prayer. Well, guess what's happened since Zohran Mamdani's become mayor of New York City? He's ramped it up. He's ramped it up. So now you have repeated, not just on Fridays or not just during Ramadan, you have repeated daily offerings of the blast through the speakers. And I really hesitate to call it a call to prayer, because when you have these things happening in a country like ours, and you have, New York City, the economic fulcrum of the world, happening in New York City, how is it anything other than a declaration of victory? To say in the same place when 9/11 happened, almost 25 years ago, and now you have this happening on the streets of New York City. And I'm going to play a little bit for you so you can hear and see it for yourself. Listen to and watch clip number 3. Clip 3. Go.
Here is Atlantic. We are hearing Azan. Come here. I think we take pretty off Texas stuff. Yeah. I never thought in my life he's gonna be here hearing this in the middle of New York. Good.
Guys, that's in New York City, guys. That. The first time I ever heard this with my own 2 ears is when I was in South Africa. That was in, 99, 2000? Is it a call to prayer, or is it a declaration of victory? When you have people pulling out, Muslims in New York pulling out their prayer mats and putting them in front of roadways, blocking them off, is that about pious exercise, or is that about defiant celebration of victory? Guys, we have got to wake up. We have got to wake up. This is happening in our own nation. And I want to be clear about what I'm saying. This didn't just start with Zohran Mamdani. It started under Eric Adams. But Mamdani has expanded it and ramped it up. History not only repeats itself, it often rhymes. As we're discussing this, look at that time. Following the reports of the slaughter of Christians in Nigeria, the U.S. has already done some targeted airstrikes. Well, we now have a small contingent of U.S. military officers in Nigeria. They've touched down in Nigeria to help provide support and training to push back against, frankly, the genocide of Christians in Nigeria that's been happening for years now. That it was brought to President Trump's attention, and he expressed his disdain for that happening. Well, now we have U.S. troops. They're helping Nigerians to push back against the Boko Haram / Fulani genocidal efforts in the nation. That the world, that people at the UN say, it's not really happening. It's not really happening. We've been reporting it here on this show because we wanted to make you aware of what's going on, because it is happening. And it's true. I don't believe the United States of America needs to be the world's police. But I think this effort, you have limited soldiers who've been deployed there to train and to provide an intelligence base of support, so there can be an active, informal resistance to what's going on in Nigeria. Because, not surprisingly, similar to what happened through ISIS, guess what Boko Haram and Islamists in Africa want to accomplish? Guess what they want to do? Anybody want to guess? They want to establish a caliphate in Africa. Isn't that something? It's almost like we've read about that happening somewhere. Like there's a script almost that's being followed, that's continually pursued. Well, as we're discussing infiltration and subjugation, guys, and it's the same thing. Remember what Balaam? That was some of the same things that happened to infiltrate the people of Israel. Some of the same type of things are happening. I'm going to show you now just a little snippet of what 8th grade students at Hermantown Community School were provided with as instruction in December of 2025. Hermantown Community School is in the Duluth area in Minnesota. You have a British documentary from Channel 4 News that the Hermantown Middle School officials said, and let me give you exactly what they said. They said part of Hermantown Community School's stated goals is to use a curriculum that is anti-racist and culturally sustaining. Of course, anti-racist is defined as actively working to identify and eliminate racism in all forms in order to change policies, behaviors, and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. And culturally sustaining is defined as integrating the practices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities who have been and continue to be harmed and erased. Listen, harmed and erased through the education system. So to accomplish this, they used the British Channel 4 News video to explain ICE's actions to 8th graders in the Duluth area in Minnesota. Listen to, this is a short one. Listen to and watch. Clip number 2. Clip 2, go.
And we're going to look at why all of this could either lead to Americans finally coming to terms with undocumented immigration in their communities, or be the start of a huge shift in law enforcement that forever changes America's reputation as the land of the free.
They go on in this video to honestly to state outright lies about ICE. Outright lies. And I shared that, just that brief clip, because it's interesting. Why would this British dude be so interested in talking about ICE? And notice how he said, whether in the British accent, whether or not the Americans will deal with the undocumented citizens. Hold up, bro. Hold up. Time out. I know you still on the other side of the ocean, but ain't no such thing in the United States of America as an undocumented citizen. You see? But imagine, though, this being foisted upon 12 and 13-year-olds. He went on to condemn the deceptive and violent tactics of ICE. People being arrested without due process of laws. Like, dude, you have no authority to discuss what we do in our nation. You on the other side of the water. But you know what? Some of those folks want to see happen in our country the same things that are happening in European countries. But this is being foisted upon 8th graders in the Minnesota area. Remember how we started the show? How did the Israelites stray from fidelity to Yahweh after the elders who survived Joshua passed on? That's how.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily